Hello students, I'd like to welcome you to this presentation about the planets in our solar system. And you may think to yourself, this is pretty strange, talking about planets and art. And while that is true, that this is sort of a science-based subject, if you look at the picture in front of you, you'll notice that it's pretty cool. All those planets lined up so neatly. But it's not a photograph. No, someone painted or illustrated this piece of art for us to be able to understand the information that scientists are trying to provide for us. There's no way we could just give a photograph of the entire solar system in one little picture and have anybody be able to understand what it meant, even if we could do it, because the planets would be so small. But here we can look at this picture and understand basically what our solar system is. And that's kind of where I want to start this presentation. And if you'll look, we have a small video to look at, and we'll look at that now. Oh look, there's a large, very, very large credit for that last illustration. To be fair, you can see it says graphic artists and contractors. So that gives you an idea that somebody got paid money to make that art for NASA. And so that kind of gives us an idea of what we could do for art. Okay, so if you're really smart, you'll kind of take note of the order of the planets as I'm presenting them to you. And you'll see that I'm giving you to in the order that they are in our solar system. And we'll talk more about whether there are 8 or 9 planets, but the first planet in our solar system, going from the sun outward, is Mercury. And Sean Teacher shows you these photographs as a basis to imagine what you could do as artwork. In other words, you look at the picture and make your own artwork of, let's say, Mercury. Wait a second. That's a picture of Mercury? It looks like the sun. No. Look right almost just above the center of the sun. Do you see that little speck? That sort of little dot in front of the sun? That's Mercury. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale or the size. That's our sun, and that little dot is the planet Mercury. As it's going across the sun, we can see the shadow of Mercury from Earth in a telescope. So that's a pretty incredible photograph there. And hopefully by looking at the scale of things, how one planet in front of a star kind of appears to us, maybe that could somehow inspire you to make some kind of art. For Sean Teacher, just looking at something so awesome makes me think, wow, I'd like to draw something that is equally inspiring. Now, an interesting thing about photography and art, when we talk about science, is that sometimes we use ideas of color to illustrate things that aren't really there for the eye to see. Here, the satellite messenger has taken a photograph of the planet Mercury and sent the image through its radio magic back to Earth. Only when it took the picture, it considered different kinds of rocks as different colors. So scientists could look at this and sort of see what the surface of Mercury looked like based on the color that the satellite sent back to us. If you really saw it in a telescope, it just looks gray. It just looks like a gray mass. But this sort of different colors gave scientists information about the planet, and therefore they are able to tell other people what that information means based on these colors. The colors aren't real, but they sure are pretty and quite inspiring, I might add. Here we see Venus. Children, Venus really doesn't look like this, but basically, like I spoke about in the last photograph of Mercury, we have false color images of Venus that gives us different information about what the planet is like. And therefore, scientists are able to explain to other people what that means. It's very hard to explain things to people who aren't necessarily scientists and who aren't necessarily interested in it unless you add something that makes it visually exciting. And that's what this photograph does. Could you imagine yourself? Could you make a painting or a drawing that illustrated what these things are saying and make it just as beautiful? That's the idea behind this presentation. When I look at all the different colors and the way they fit together in this composition, it makes me want to know more about Venus. And that's kind of what Sean Teacher's trying to say, that although art should be entertaining, sometimes art can be informative. It can give us information and encourage us to want to learn more. And in fact, when we want to learn more, we can encourage other people to want to learn more based on how well we can communicate that information. Now, here is an actual photograph from the Kepler telescope of Venus. If you were just a few miles outside the orbit of Venus, this is what it might look like to you. Sean Teachers looked at Venus through his own telescope, and when I saw it, it just kind of looked like a gray dot. But the Kepler telescope is a lot more powerful than Sean Teacher's telescope. Anyway, sometimes when you get up very early in the morning and you look maybe a little towards the west, and you look at the horizon, you see a very bright star. It's so much brighter than all the others. That's usually Venus. So Venus is certainly visible to the human eye from just looking out of your back porch in the morning. Here's an example of what I was talking about. We see astronauts in one of our space stations zooming around the Earth, and that sort of bright spot right in the center was a picture taken of Venus from the orbit of Earth. And another interesting thing to look at is that sort of gray ring. That gray ring is our atmosphere. That's the air we breathe. So that makes it a very interesting photograph to look at. Speaking of Earth, look at that picture. Now, it's really obvious to me that the color represented here isn't natural color. If you were to look at Earth from its orbit in a satellite, it wouldn't be this color. But like Sean Teacher has mentioned before, the color that we see represents information. The arrows that are plotted along the ocean there that almost give it a texture, they show information about the movement of ocean currents and weather. So once again, we have this idea that art can provide for us or illustrate information that people who aren't necessarily scientists or meteorologists can understand about weather. Anybody can look at those arrows and see the direction of something moving. Perhaps those are ocean currents, or perhaps those are weather patterns and the way they move around the world. So these things become quite interesting to regular people. When you look at the weather every night on the news, you see lots of images similar to this that in fact are quite beautiful just in and of themselves without conveying any information. This is very pretty to me. And then, if you just wanted a picture of what our planet looked like, there it is in all its glory. By the way, another way of thinking of this, where we could say that art provides information, and this happens regularly through the idea of giving information through art, through science. Many people, many adults, many grown-ups believe that the earth is flat, sadly. But students, I'd like you to look at this picture. The earth is obviously not flat. So the next time you hear someone saying that, don't call them out on it, but in your own heart, you've seen this photograph, so hopefully you'll know the truth for you. The next planet we want to look at is, can Mars provide a lot of art opportunities? And really, it gives us kind of hope for the future. Scientists think that Mars could be populated by people someday, that we probably within your lifetime will send people to Mars. And that idea to me is fantastic. When I look at Mars and think, this could be another Earth, you can see that there's water and atmosphere there. So they think that Mars was a lot like Earth once, that perhaps it was hit by an asteroid or a meteorite of some sort to go away. They think it's possible that life could still be there in some basic form. We don't know for sure, but we're certainly sending satellites there, and probably people will be there someday soon. And looking at it in different ways makes us understand things about this planet that's our sister. Mars is a little smaller than Earth, but it's not so far away. Looking at this, that probably everything is there for us to begin again if we wanted to. So when you think about that, how could you imagine art that relates to this idea of Mars being a new place to live? It won't be like going to a new apartment or a new house. It's going to be a long, long journey to get there. And we've got to take everything we need with us, because if we don't, then there's no Lynn's down the street. There's no grocery store or hardware store or convenience store down the street. In fact, there's not any streets. So yeah, it's a whole new beginning. There's another picture of Mars from the Hubble telescope. And I think I like this one because it's so colorful, but the colors are so subdued, so calm. It makes me think of, Mars being out there all by itself. No people on Mars. Think about that. It would be a very harsh environment to live in, but people could possibly live there. The next planet to look at is Jupiter. Jupiter's big. Look at the size of that thing. If you look, there's a picture of its moon beside it. And there's a picture of the planet Jupiter from the satellite Juno. And the color here and the texture of the storms that are on the planet are absolutely fabulous to me. It looks indescribable. The giant red spot up there is a storm that was going on, scientists think anyway, for about 700 years before I was born. That storm is bigger than our whole planet, and it's been going on for hundreds of years. That's a pretty bad storm, kids. And here, Sean Teacher wants to talk about the word juxtaposition. And what am I saying is that when you're thinking, maybe you're thinking you're in the satellite, the space traveling satellite Juno, and you're outside of the planet Jupiter looking, and there just beyond Jupiter in its orbit is its small little moon, Ganymede. And I just wanted you to see that so that you could say to yourself, if I was going to make a planet, should I make that planet's moons outside of it? And if I did, do I know that that planet has moons? Because many times when you look at a planet through the telescope, its moons aren't visible. And when you look at the same planet the next night, the moons have moved around on you. That while it was on the right side last night, it's on the left side tonight. Tomorrow night it may not even be visible, and the next night there may be 3 of them out there. And unless you know your moon business, you have no idea what's going on out there. But it makes a person think, all those moons are rolling around out there without anybody thinking about it. And suddenly when you see it, or when you try to tell other people about it, it's mysterious and exciting at the same time. There's Saturn and its moon Titan from the satellite Cassini. See those black stripes on the planet? Those are the shadows of Saturn's rings. And an interesting thing about the rings of Saturn is we think that Saturn is the only planet with rings, but many planets, well, I shouldn't say many, but 2 or 3 of the other planets have some form of rings. It's just that Saturn's are so visible. You can see them from just a cheap telescope when you look through it sometimes. Here again we see false color on a planet to provide information. And if you look to the left, it looks like when you look at the planet, it looks like whoever took the photograph, they said, oh, we're not going to put it in the center, we're just going to take a picture really quick. But if you really look at it, you can see sort of 2 blue dots that are to the left of the planet. And those 2 blue dots are the moons of Saturn, Rhea and Dione. And when I see that, I think to myself, wow, that's incredible. These moons, some of them, and I'm not saying necessarily Rhea and Dione, but some of the moons, they think on some of the planets, may also be capable of supporting life. Some of them are ice moons, meaning they're almost entirely composed of water. So lots to learn about the solar system, that things that are still mysteries to us, but that we have a good idea, but we're just not sure yet. If you look right in the middle of Saturn, you'll see a storm they call the Dragon Storm. And it's full of lightning and electricity. It's quite beautiful, I think. And when I see these things, I think to myself, I kind of want to draw that. I kind of want to color that because it looks so unlike anything I've ever seen before. And that kind of inspires me to want to make art. Here is Uranus. It's not very much, is it? But one thing that is sort of fantastic is I say to you, here is Uranus from Voyager. When I was a child, I believe I was 9 years old, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were sent away by NASA out into our solar system. And they had on them several things, many cameras to take pictures and send them back, radio instruments to take measurements of our galaxy, not our galaxy, but our solar system, and send this information back to scientists on Earth. It's interesting, children, because it took off when I was 9, and it has traveled every day, every hour, every minute, every second since I was 9. And just in a couple of years ago, I think 2018, it left our solar system. Think about that. It's traveled my whole life just to get to the edge of our solar system. There is a gold record, an LP, which was very popular at the time. It even shows a little diagram of how to play the record. And it's made of solid gold, and on it are the sounds of Earth. And scientists put it on Voyager to be a message of hope and friendliness, of peace to any civilization outside of our solar system that might find it. It sounds strange when you hear it now, but it really happened. And those satellites still occasionally send messages to scientists here on Earth. And in 19, Voyager leaving Uranus. It's kind of beautiful if you ask me. And there's Neptune. Neptune has some rings. You can't see them here. But it's very blue. And here we see Neptune in false color again. It's an interesting photograph. There's not much information here. I'm not sure that you would want to make an illustration of Neptune, but maybe that's the one for you. I don't know. But the false color here illustrates they call it the haze. They're not going so far as calling it an atmosphere, but it's something that is around Neptune. So the way Sean Teacher understands it, it's something like an atmosphere. And finally, from the satellite New Horizons, we see Pluto. If you look right sort of at the lower right part of this image, you'll see what many people call the heart of Pluto. And it kind of looks like the shape of a heart. And it certainly has lots of interesting color and texture to it. Within my lifetime, I don't know, I guess I was about 30 when it happened, a scientist by the name of Neil deGrasse Tyson decided that Pluto was too small to be a planet. So in an example of how knowledge changes over time, Pluto was removed as a planet from our solar system. Now, it's still there, of course, but people don't consider it a planet anymore. When Sean Teacher was a child, When I was a student, there were 9 planets in our solar system, and today there are 8. And Pluto has been downgraded. But Sean Teacher thought he would include one picture of it just so you could see it. Anyway, that's our presentation on the planets, and hopefully you have a new idea or two about how to produce an image of your own that would illustrate one of the planets in our solar system. So you just ask yourself, which of these planets seems the most likely to inspire you to want to make a piece of art that could be thought of as either beautiful or beautiful because it conveys so much information about the illustration that you're making. Anyway, thanks for watching.